Good morning. I'm Sara Bean, editor of FMJ, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar, How to Overcome the Comms Gap in FM with AI and Tech Tools. According to the 2026 UK Facilities Management Market Research Report by askporter, facilities management professionals want clear, verifiable evidence of work being delivered with teams that can communicate progress in real time. This requires technology that is affordable, intuitive, and quick to adopt. This webinar provides a valuable overview of the main findings of the report, along with a panel discussion on practical strategic solutions that can help close this communications gap. We will provide a link to the report on the chat during the webinar, and we'll also include it on a follow-up email. I've put a series of questions to the panel, but would invite delegates to post any queries or comments, and we'll get to them towards the end of this session. I'd like to start by asking the panel to introduce themselves, including a brief overview on their organisations. And if we've been with you, Harry.
Oh, thanks so much. Good morning, everyone. So my name's Harry. I'm Chief Product Officer at askporter. We straddle two markets, the housing market and today, the FM market. We see ourselves, we do two core things. One is we bridge that communications piece between FM providers and their customers, single point of contact, multi-channel. And then we also handle the tasks and everything that comes out of those conversations. So AI driven, and yes, everything about communications and task management, task automation.
Brilliant. Can I go to you next, Andrew?
Yeah, hello everybody. My name's Andy Targell. So I head up the real estate technology advisory arm within JLL Technologies. JLL really covers the full gamut of all aspects of real estate, from where to begin, where to build, financing, delivering, operating, running, disposal of buildings, and all the services in between. In JLL Technologies, which is where I'm working in, we do all a range of technology services from consultancy, systems implementation, things from CAFM and IWFM. We also have our own products that we go to market with as well. So a full range across real estate.
Brilliant. And to you, Mark.
Hi, morning everyone. Mark Griffiths, now MD for the last 6 years in my own workplace and FM consultancy business, WMA. Keen interest in technology in FM. I'm an active member of the IWFM Technology SIG, and up until last October, I'm now the former chair of judges for the IWFM Awards. And because I like a bit of volunteering, I'll now do some work for the BSI on their FM Strategy Committee and chair that up as well. So I'm looking forward to today.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. Well, I mentioned at the beginning of this, the report, which makes really interesting reading. And there's a lot of it to look at. And obviously people can read it at their leisure after this. But Harry, would you mind just going through some of the key findings, some of the things that really stood out for you?
Yeah, sure, no worries. So I think the things that really stood out for me was around the amount of time that people are spending on unplanned work. So 75% of respondents on average spending just under 50% of their time on reactive. And I know we'll discuss some of that later. But what that means is a lot of the SLAs and stuff are not being met, and that leads to knock-on effects. But what I thought was interesting related to this was actually that this isn't an issue with budgets. Budgets have generally risen. We don't see an issue where people saying they can't spend their money. So it feels a lot of it is around operational efficiency or inefficiencies, and then adding into that sort of some of the labour issues, so labour shortages, skilled people leaving the industry. So yeah, I think overall for me, really pointed around inefficient systems, integration problems, so poor workflows and fragmented tools was the common theme I saw.
That's really interesting about the budget thing. That tells you a lot. Because I've spoken to some FMs in the past and said this is part of the problem, that they sort of order things because they've got the budget, but none of it fits together. From the corporate side, Andrew, is this the kind of thing that really concerns you? Is it people saying I'm worried about overspending my budget, or it's more like I'm worried I'm buying the wrong thing?
Oh gosh, I mean, the report talks about things like labour
Yeah.
short costs, data integration, all those sort of things. I suppose from the corporate side of it, they all matter. But where does the biggest problem is? Well, probably the way I see it, and I'm a little bit IT-ish, so maybe I'm a little bit biased here, but I tend to look at it in terms of I think the data sort of fragmentation, I think that's a key issue, because I think that has a big implication and big impact on trust and the erosion of trust. And I think those two are really closely linked. So I think those two things. And I was just looking, I think in the report it says something like 76% of FM leaders admit their systems don't integrate effectively. So I mean that's quite a telling statement, isn't it? And I think that disconnection trickles up to the client relationship. So without integrated technology and data, or verifiable data, you can't really explain performance. And then where are you? Then you're not trusting. So I think you can't sort of manage those other dimensions like costs and compliance and the workforce, labor allocation, that sort of stuff, without good data. So I don't think it's just a technology issue. I think it leads into a sort of a credibility issue. And I think if you can't sort of like show the evidence of your work, that is where you then start to lead to trust breakdown. So I think that's where I put it. That data fragmentation, probably a tech fragmentation, is leads to that issue, I think.
Very interesting. Mark, what are you finding with the practicing FMs, both on the client as well as the provider side?
I think there's some common themes. I think Andrew summarised it really well. But I think the biggest issues stem from that kind of combination of responsibility overload and data poverty. I wouldn't, without wishing to be too confrontational, I wouldn't necessarily recognise the fact that budgets are always rising either, Harry, but I get where you're coming from. I think in some sectors they are, but we work with public and private sector clients, and there's a lot of challenges there. But I think that one of the big themes is that you've got a lot of responsibility overload and perhaps a little bit of data poverty, and I think that's where the dots don't join. We've done some research about 18 months ago now on this with an academic partner, and we've spoken about that many a time in the past. But I think in short, there's more there for FMs to deliver than ever. But the tools they have often fail to talk to each other, kind of pick it up on Andrew's point. And that then goes back to continually being reactive rather than more strategic. And I think you can find a way to kind of break that prove it later culture and get to more proactive assurance. I've got that data. This tells me this is where we are, and this is what we've done, rather than, oh, hang on, I'll come back to you, and you're scrolling through numerous bits of information. I think joining the dots on the data for me is a key one. I think that's something the industry as a whole needs to embrace. We're not quite there yet, I think.
Yeah, very good point. Harry, that sort of brings us back to sort of one of the key points of your research, which was about reactive maintenance and it's sort of firefighting. I think there was one of the biggest concerns is the level of reactive firefighting, 73% weekly, time and labor waste, and that brings us to the problem with unplanned work also, which we can get to a bit later. Trying to deploy staff in a much more well thought out way rather than just responding. So, can you give us some examples of the impact this has on respondents?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess just before jumping into that, Mark's point about the budgets. I was surprised by the results in the survey that it was saying people's budgets are rising and they're not having problems spending it. But maybe it's just around spending it on the right things in the right places, and maybe they just don't have the options to spend it. But yeah, just on the reactive thing. I mean, I think we've all been in a position where in October we turn on our boiler and it doesn't work and it's suddenly got cold and you've got to call someone out to come and help. And actually, if we'd just done the service back in August and got it ready, then we'd be ready to go and we wouldn't have that that sudden first few weeks of coldness. And I think that is something that happens then across FM and clients. If people are reacting, then they can't plan and prevent things that are coming up. And what that means is that you have a poor experience as a customer. Your office isn't working properly, your site isn't working properly. It's always just around all you see is things breaking and needing to fix them, rather than everything running smoothly. So I think that's one big impact on the sort of customer experience. And I think the other thing is that then impacts morale with your employees, because ultimately they are just doing fixing and not actually feeling that they're necessarily providing really good value and experience to their users. We talked around retiring workforce, loss of institutional knowledge. And so I think when you combine that with that sort of time being spent on unplanned work, you're burning out the skilled people that you really have. So for those for me are the two things. One is not being able to plan and actually deliver a really great experience over time, and the other thing is the impact that that has on your employees and not giving them satisfaction in their job, or as much satisfaction as they could have.
Do you think that would actually lead people to look to work elsewhere if they find that the systems they're being given to manage their their contracts is just aren't good enough, especially at the sort of the front end with the engineers, because engineers are so desperately needed across the sector.
I mean, I do. I think we've all been in a job where as an engineer,
Mm.
you want to fix things, you want to be working on
Yeah,
the system, on the product, whatever it may be on the. What you don't want to be doing is filling in forms, and at the end of every day, having to spend 2 hours,
mm.
to complete what's been done. And we've spoken to multiple people that sort of run, large airports where their engineers are fixing things and then having to spend, a day a week just reporting on that once
Yeah,
they fixed it. So then the problem is that from a user or from a customer point of view, you raise the issue, you don't know it's been fixed. It's actually been fixed 2 days ago, but you might not be aware of that and you're not seeing any updates. So yeah, I do think, you want to make sure people are doing the job that they are hired to do, that their skill is set is for, and that they enjoy doing, because ultimately then, they're going to stay within that role.
yeah, that's quite key. Andrew, what are you finding in terms of the operational impact when people are relying on this kind of reactive kind of data, like this many things broken, was fixed?
Yeah, yeah. I think, well, I mean, the report talks it, calls it sort of the firefighting club, doesn't it? I mean, I sort of call it whack-a-mole, you sort of like do,
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of constantly. I think the problem with that is, I mean, Harry sort of like picked up on some of the reports captured really some of the key operational impacts there. But I think really one is financial control. I mean, there's all these SLAs being missed and that sort of stuff. You get into this whack-a-mole cycle and you start then having to react to a thing not being fixed, which means you're addressing it probably in an inefficient way, and you start to put more people onto it, more time onto it, and then you start getting yourself, you're sort of like mixed up. You're
Yeah.
now not able to spend the time on the planned work or things you need to be looking forward to, and it becomes a bit of a sort of like reinforcing negative cycle. And I think that has an impact on budget planning and budget control and financial control, because it means you're having to spend more time fixing things and addressing things, which means you're causing service debt later on.
Mm.
That causes, I think, a financial impact. The other thing is, I mean, this is what Harry's talking about, is you've got great people working on reactive stuff, and that is exhausting sometimes. To be fair, some people love it. Some people get a real thrill and a buzz from that constant whack-a-mole world. With that, it can be a bit exhausting sometimes. And I think if you pile that on with potentially some iffy systems, like they've got to do, like 25 minutes of report filling for a 2-minute job, then it just makes that worse. And I think people do lose interest and are from that employee experience, that employee place you want to create for them. Is that right? And I don't think it is. And I think the other thing is you undermine the ability to improve, to learn.
Mm.
Because every problem that goes wrong, actually, in the ideal world, is an opportunity to do something better, learn from it, and improve. If you are in constant whack-a-mole mode, you just don't get the time to stop, pause, reflect, and work out, actually, how can we avoid this issue happening? In IT world, they call it, IT problem management, where you're looking at your tickets and your issues and seeing what can we do to mitigate those things happening again. And I think that's the problem with being so reactive, focused on the reactive part, is you're constantly trying to look behind and address it. So that causes whack-a-mole. But I think the other thing is reactive or past data can be useful to shape the future. And so it can do that, but I think we don't do that enough. I think would be my view. So yeah, financial, I think burning people out and they're not being used effectively, and avoiding us using that. We're not using that data operationally to improve the future as well, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a lot, and it's also, I suppose, when you talk about planning, it's also going to be to do with your operational costs and your capital costs as well. If you have to look at replacing things, if you don't know, if you don't have the data that shows you these things are becoming more and more unreliable, then therefore you're not going to sort of make plans to rectify it. Um, I mean, what, Mark, would you say is the sort of the reactive time thing, is the impact this has on FM providers to retain staff and meet their SLAs? I mean, that's got to be key. I mean, we have talked a bit about staff, but also if they're on a contract and they're just reacting because they don't have the right tools to measure what's going to come up. Does that not impact them a lot?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, as I jokingly describe it, when I used to have a proper job and I was an ops director for an FM provider, yeah, you do worry about losing your staff, and I think it's even more acute now. It's the age profile, as Harry alluded to earlier, and
Mm.
everything else that goes on it. But there's also that, you know, engineers. I'm one of them. I'll confess. You know, we're a funny bunch. You know, we take a lot of pride in what we do, and some of us. I used to love the cut and thrust of a few problems, but you can't do crisis management all the time. It's it's very difficult. And I think if you an underused phrase around the engineering side of things is, you know, these people are craftsmen, and if you're experiencing more chaos than craftsmanship, it's not going to let you stay on board, is it? You're going to be a little bit, you know, a little bit twitchy about where you're going,
Mm.
and it's still there's a lot of demand for skilled people out there at the moment, so you can be a bit selective about where you want to go, but there's a wider impact to it as well. Whether you're providing services in-house, or whether you're a provider, external FM provider, or whatever it might be, if you're, you know, that proactive element, and the clues are in the title. You know, we call it planned maintenance for a reason, we call it unplanned for
Yeah,
another. And
yeah.
if you haven't got those proportions right, yeah, you can recover it over time. I've seen it done well. That will help. And you're doing more planned than unplanned. Some say 60/40, some say 70/30, whatever it might be. You can start to build that data, start to join those dots, and then
Mm.
you haven't got so many missed compliance tasks. You've got a better level of client satisfaction. And when you're talking about the finances of it, because that is, you know, it's expenditure. That reactive time is a massive expenditure. You can then justify your budgetary position, whether it's an increase, staying static, you know, perhaps reapportioning your allowances in different areas. That's I think only going to help the situation. But yeah, going away from the chaos and focusing more on the kind of refined output, I think is a good way to go. I would suggest.
Brilliant. You've probably seen, we've just done a quick poll, which we'll get to in a bit, asking what's your biggest daily pain point. Is it the cost, staffing, the systems data, or client trust? Which brings me to my next question to all of you, really. What do you think is the commercial impact of missing SLAs and the difficulty of justifying your budget creases without having verifiable, I can never say that word, work data? I mean, Harry, what was the sort of the overriding view of respondents in the survey on that front?
Yeah, I mean, well, just to work on that, yeah, I think just going back to the engineering point, I was just remembering. I think so often that you'd be in an office and an engineer will turn up to fix something, and you could they're like every time it's like, oh, I'm back to fix this. You sort of see that frustration with them, and I think that is such a telling point of when someone is frustrated with their role and then ultimately tries other things. So yeah, I think we've all seen that. On the commercial side, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, again, so I often use we're a remote company, but I have a shared office space that I often use, and the hot water tap there is just constantly failing. And ultimately being able to have a cup of tea is such an important thing when in an office. And ultimately that does lead you to consider, these things aren't working properly, and they're not being fixed, in time. And then there's a big queue because there's a kettle that takes ages to boil. You do consider whether you're going to be renewing your contract with that company. So I think if you're not providing a better service, if it's not stable, if it's not secure, then you're thinking around, is this the provider that I want to have? So I think there's a real contract risk there if SLAs aren't met, and that obviously has major commercial impacts. And then the other thing is just in terms of cost. As we touched upon, but reactive maintenance is always going to be more expensive than actually dealing with the problem up front. I talked about that boiler issue earlier. Trying to get someone out quickly to fix your boiler, in November when it's broken and everyone else is trying to do the same, is a lot more expensive than having a service done in August, where they just come along at a convenient time. So emergency call outs, those repeat visits where things are being done, it's just inefficient use of contractors and eats into your margin pretty quickly. So even if your budgets are rising a bit, and in time your profitability suffers because you're just spending it on things that are not improving your bottom line.
I mean, Andrew, do you ever get situations where people are talking about, oh, we had a problem with our software, so we couldn't really give you the data? And how well would that go with clients?
Yes, you do. You do hear that. We got SLAs as a whole. It's a whole kit
Yeah,
name, right, isn't it? I mean, I have a thing of SLAs. I mean, most of the time, they're often the things that people think we should be measuring, but they don't actually relevant measure. They're not really the things that people really want to measure.
yeah, yeah,
They just put them in there because they're things that we could measure or we can measure. We know how to track number of tickets or number of tickets closed. But does that matter? Well, no, probably not. It's like, have we,
mm,
it's probably how many times we avoided going to an issue and mitigated it. That might be a better way of doing it. So I think the SLAs themselves, are they really valuable? Are they really driving the right outcomes you want? That's often the case, and they're not. And so what happens is, even if you are reporting the SLAs, no one cares about them because they're not really relevant, and they only care about them if you fail them because then you get a penalty. So
yeah,
the penalty bit there, but I think the system bit, yeah, often happens a lot. And I think people are outsourcing to service providers, and they're putting in place these SLAs and these frameworks. And sometimes they'll say these are what they are, and actually to the supplier that can be a bit fiddly. Sometimes well, these aren't normal, these are a bit odd, and they have to then systemize and change things to get them working. And I think you have to be really crystal clear in the contracting phase. Can you do these? What's the implication of doing that?
yeah,
Are there any alternatives you suggest and why? And actually have a more of a dialogue there. I think it needs to be a bit more collaborative because most of the vendors will have the capabilities to do all the core basic SLAs you need. When there are some oddities or some complexities there, I think you need to have a dialogue and make sure that you're getting the right outcome. Because otherwise, what happens is you onboard the supplier, the service providers, and then you spend a year trying to fix the system to do it. And then at the end of it, no one cares anyway because it wasn't right. So I think getting that really clear, having that open dialogue about SLAs and the reporting capability of those with vendors and partners early on before you submit and sign is
yeah,
important. And then being flexible to adjust things if necessary, because is it really worthwhile the poor vendor spending loads and loads of money tweaking just for one report for you that actually is it really that important? And then you're creating a problem straight away.
mm.
And a potential delay. So I think that needs to be more collaborative to avoid, well, it's a vendor's problem. I think it needs to be more collaborative.
That is really interesting, Mark. What about whenever you're dealing with, you must deal with a range of people, some of
Mm.
who are very on it when it comes to knowing which tech they're going to need, but you must get others who just, I mean, I still hearing rumors of people still using spreadsheets.
Well, yeah, I won't name names because that wouldn't be fair. But yeah, we were recently part of an audit team for a large contract, and it's something that Andrew's had me rattle on about this when we were on a panel of yours last year, Sarah. But
Mm,
this, you turn along. Okay, we want to look at your asset register. We want to look at your regime. We want to see
yeah,
where we are. Here's an Excel spreadsheet. I'm like, oh my, really? But it's still the kind of vehicle of
yeah,
choice. And I think there's lots of people that produce stats talking about the vast majority of these things still being a default, whether you're exporting it from the system, but it's not that difficult. But yeah, I think being more tuned into data is, I go on about this a lot, and picking up on Andrew's point, but things like SLAs, making them more iterative, and
mm,
constantly revisit them, using the data to inform where you are, so you can be more selective and more relevant to the organisation, and also going out to your organisation. Are these working? Not just keeping it as the head of workplace, the head of FM, and the provider or the team if you're insourced, but because I think SLAs are just as important for an insourced team as well. That how are you looking at this? Does it work for the organisation? And it helps you get that more strategic conversation. Is this helping our day-to-day operations? How's this tuning in for better outcomes for the business? This is what FM workplace practitioners are all around. And I think that's the
mm.
part that's not quite there. And I think the industry is crying out for more learning for FM practitioners around how to handle data. The systems will do what the systems will do, but that whole piece there around let's get that understanding of data. It doesn't have to be overly complicated, but joining those dots, making those systems work, it's going to help everything be much more synchronized. And I think it doesn't have to be lots of bells and whistles and fireworks. Some
Yeah,
organizations can afford that and do things in a really do it over a medium term, but there'll be others that there's still with that expectation here to, we can order something from Amazon, other good parcel carriers are out there, as we all know, but, and you can see when it's coming, but you can't tell when somebody's going to come to your office and repair a fan coil unit.
Yeah.
It's mad, and I think if there's a way of overcoming that and being less reluctant, I think it will. It's getting better. Don't get me wrong, but I think people just need to embrace it a little bit more. There's a lot of that data and systems that are there now that you can use.
Well,
Well,
It just needs to
talking
be
of which,
adopted more.
oh, I was going to ask
we'll
a
move on
question.
to Harry here, who's
Yeah.
I'm going to ask him to outline some of the ways that you can deal with these challenges. Because that is the area where I think most people seem to trip up, is that there's a lot of systems out there, and FMs are not IT people. And obviously people like you, Mark, understand the tech. And you, Andrew, as well, obviously you have. But a lot of us, including myself, are not tech-minded, and therefore it's really hard to know where to start. And yet they have the responsibility of finding the right system. So where do they start, Harry? Big question.
Yeah, yeah. I think what's so important when you're setting out on this journey is, and when we talk about sort of automation integration, um, it's not about adding features. Like automation is around reducing friction and improving the processes. And I think we can see this in the survey where I think it says something like 82% of respondents have adopted smart building or IoT technology, and yet 83% still they lack real-time visibility. So
Yeah.
we've got all these people getting this information, but yet they still can't see stuff. So you're investing in the technology and not getting the outcomes you expect. So it's definitely around thinking about, what is it that you actually are trying to achieve? What is it that you need to do? You've got to start with thinking around what the customer actually wants. So, what is the information that creates confidence for the client? And it's interesting, like, you talk around the sort of the live view of the contracts that are coming, but I think we've also always got to get that balance between what's actually going to give value. So, do I need a live map, or do I just need the time that the contractor is going to be there? And I don't need to invest in really, fancy this and that. I've just got to think around, this is the thing that's important to me. I need to know when the contractor arrives. I don't care the route that they're taking or how they're traveling. I want them to know they're going to be on time. And if they're late, they're going to let me know. So
Yeah.
it's not all singing and all dancing. It's just really thinking about, a heat map almost of what happens and the problems that you have. And then it's around making sure that the systems are talking to each other. So, we talked multiple times around having different systems everywhere, but making sure when you're setting out on that journey, that you are, that integration is key. And then, finally, I think on the transparency side, so the automation is around making sure you're having the right features, making sure it's reducing friction, making sure you're targeting the problems that really impact. The integration is always setting out, thinking on, even if it's not from day one, how are you going to get to that big picture of everything coming together? And then the transparency side of things. It's really interesting in the survey. It says 4 in 5 respondents say they're confident clients have full visibility into completed maintenance tasks. And yet 3 in 5 clients say they frequently express a loss of trust due to perceived maintenance issues. So either the information that's being given isn't correct, or people aren't acting on that information. So there's a real mismatch between what clients expect and what they actually see. So you've got to, again, think around, what are we doing with this data? What's the value it's going to give to the end user? And making sure it's reliable and close to real time, because otherwise you lose the trust.
Well, the real time thing's a brilliant point. Andrew, what about you? You've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to add to that a little bit. I think so often in the FM world, you're looking at sort of like, how they address some of the challenges of dealing with these automation and integration challenges. And I think it's a bit overwhelming. They hear these questions like real time, data analytics, predictive, integration, data platforms. And oh my goodness me. And then the answer, the question work starts to be, we must integrate everything. Everything must be connected and it must be here. And actually no one's asked the question why. And I think that is the really important thing for FMers, is to not think about all that stuff. Think about the why. What are your business goals, and how do you measure those business goals, and start there. Because if you start on those smaller areas, you can then work through and go, actually, we need to integrate this. We need to connect that. We need to do that. And it might not need to be real time. Real time is really hard. Real time is really expensive. Is real time really valuable? Probably not. Near time, just in time, about okay time. We talk about real time, but actually, if you have a work order set of analytics and data, and it's real time, or it's every half an hour, that can be a huge cost difference, by the way. Especially with lots of things, all that stuff about real time. So I think you need to think back to the goals, focus on those. How are you going to measure those? How can we measure our business goals and how we track those? And think about the bits of data and integrations you need to make that happen, and start small and build. And don't think about everything's going to be integrated all at once, because otherwise it's a case of everything everywhere all at once, and that's just overwhelming. Yeah.
Can we talk just a little bit about the sort of legacy side as well, though? Mark, stuff that you already have in place.
Yeah.
Is stuff being just jettisoned along the way that's just not used or not used correctly, and they just have to, it sounds it's going to be a lot easier if you're starting in a way, if you're starting from scratch. I met an FM last year who had joined an organization that had no CAFM system even in place. So in a way, they had a blank sheet to work with.
Yeah.
And then there was others talking about the fact that they had lots of different systems, but they weren't really sure which bits to concentrate on.
I would say, I think if you can start with a blank sheet of paper, great. I think doing that is somewhat difficult. I think there's always some form of system there. I think the ability to integrate existing systems is much better now than it was, years ago. In a previous life, I had a interesting conversation with a construction colleague when I worked for Scanscrew, who said to me, we were doing something with a PFI, and we were the provider, they were the constructor. I said, well, let's integrate all these systems because it'd be much better for us, because it will never happen. Don't be so stupid. It wasn't. I'm paraphrasing with a few more swear words in there, but it was. God, that'll never happen. It never happened. But now you take it for granted that you can do that, and I think you can retrospectively integrate them. It takes some investment and a little bit of patience. And I think Andrew's point about being clear about what you want it for and how you want it is key. And I think irrespective of the route you go down, I think it's a maturity level. We show it as a roadmap when we're talking to clients about it, and it's, I don't want to use the J word, journey, because everyone uses that and it sounds like the X Factor or something, but it's where you want to be on that roadmap.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with, we describe it as levels 1 to 4, but this is where you want to be as an organisation for now. You may want to get to level 2, level 3, ultimately level 4, but that's going to take some time, and you've got to be very clear about what you're doing and how you're getting things right. And I think that the bigger focus is on, you don't need more systems. I think they need to be connected.
Yeah.
And that connectivity is the kind of multiplier. It can help you over time if you get it right, reduce cost pressures and that kind of thing. And also focused on the quality and reliability of your service, because you have some usable data. You can say, well, this is our basket of measures. Be clear what that is. I think that's the mistake lots of people make. And if you've got that, you can apply it to some systems. There are some really ancient systems that were around when I was on the tools. They're probably better not to try and integrate those. There's still a lot of those around, especially in the city of London. But I think that's the key one. If you know what you want, why you want it, and build it up. Don't be afraid to build it up slowly. People want to be bold. That's fine, but people sometimes get excited by the bells and whistles and everything else. And going back to the earlier point that Harry made about my comments on Amazon drivers, a bit of a clumsy kind of description. No, apologies for that, but I think there is that expectation about doing things in real time, but it does come with a cost, as Andrew said. And I think you've got to get that measure, that measure right. So I hope that answers the question.
So. Yeah, it does. Harry, you must have conversations with clients all the time, because your whole raise on debt is to communicate these systems together. So you must need to sort of hold their hand a bit and go, okay, so what is it you need to know, and then work your way backwards, and what do you have already in place that needs to talk to each other?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there were sort of 2 points that the really important takeaways here, and I think the career one is a really, it's one I'd already noted down and wanted to chat about, because I think it is a really, really good example where people think they want something, but when you say to them, okay, that sounds really cool, and it's really great, but is it really going to add value? Like, is it really something that at the end of the day is going to make a significant difference to your bottom line, to your NPS score, to your KPI, whatever it may be? And so I think it's always about thinking, what is the problem you're trying to solve, and what is the outcome from that, and how will that impact you? So I think that's a conversation that we have a lot with clients, because they come up with these solutions we're in the middle of a couple of meetings where at the moment where they're throwing us ideas of how to create the solution. And when you strip it back and you say, what are you actually trying to achieve with this feature or this piece of functionality? It's like 90% of what they're asking for is not going to help achieve that. It just sounds nice. So I think that is such an important one. And I think that the second point, to reiterate what Andrew said, which is that start small from the problem and the integration. So we always say to people, do a pilot, try it out. You don't need to have every piece of data synced between and then sync between the systems, but work out, try it, see what works, what doesn't, and then see what the integration leads to in the future. It doesn't, data that you don't need to see, every day, that maybe you just need to access, once a month. Is it really worth spending thousands of pounds to bring that into another system? So I think that starting small and iterating and building is super important. That sort of experimental approach.
Yeah, I mean, the survey that said that there was the key issue was improving the integration between the software solutions, and that the major pain point is this integration thing. And that is the bit that I find fascinating, the idea that people are buying stuff in piecemeal, and also the fact that technology in the last 18 months, especially with AI, has jumped forward so much. I mean, I'd like to get everyone's view on this. How is that impacting on how systems communicate? And like Mark said, there must be some systems which you just can no longer use. But is there wastage going on there with people buying solutions that they never really use properly? Because people always say about software that you end up using very little of it. And Harry, you've just pointed out that people are wanting this, that, and the other, and they don't actually need it for what they're trying to achieve. It's a very wide-ranging question. Sorry, guys.
I mean, it's a really interesting one. I mean, I'm going to be a bit enterprise architecture, IT architecture here. But often when we look at, and there's lots of things to unpack there, but when you look at, what we do is we do capability modeling, and we look at what it is this organization doing, and it's fairly straightforward in FM. You know what the pieces are, what an FM is doing, how they do it is different, and to what end they're doing it.
Yeah.
You can then always map on the technologies, and you often find that there's multiple things doing the same thing. There's multiple work order systems, multiple document storage systems, multiple this, multiple that. And basically what we see is often an application or technology has been purchased for a little bit of it, and something else is then purchased for another little bit of it. And so the application real estate is like buying all these buildings and only using one floor, and you've got 40 floors. And that happens over and over and over again. And then what happens is you start getting people want to integrate things. And so they go, well, I want to integrate that to that. And then you've got another work order system connecting to a work order system connecting to another one. And you start creating all these integrations, and it creates a spaghetti junction. And that is really hard. So you can always integrate stuff. Yes, you can. But actually doing that creates all these connections. And if any move or change of a system or unplugging something or changing it becomes really complicated, really expensive, and breaks everything, and no one knows what it does. And it's like chaos. And so it's not so much about integrating, it's probably about starting to think about looking at your enterprise technology stack in for FM, not like lumps that are just all integrated and mesh and concrete, but looking at a building. How can we design this building to be modular? How can we make it more like little blocks that can plug and play? So that when we plug them, that's going to connect to there and we can show the data. And that's designing for an integration first. It's designing for a more agile way of working. It's designing for a more flexible, easy way, lower cost way of moving. And that requires you to do a bit of planning up front. It's a case of you're not going to build a building just by giving it to 6 architects all doing on a different floor and then hope they all come together and that building's going to stand up. It never will. And that's exactly the same thinking for your tech stack. It won't magically all connect if you go off to 6 different systems, 6 different architects to design your building and expect them all magically to fit. You've got to have a plan. You've got to have an overall architectural plan. So I think this is where FM needs to bring in experts. You need to it will not work to bung stuff in. You need overall plan. You need to know how you want these things to work. And that means you can adjust to different things in the future. Yesterday it was, voice and Alexas, and then before that was apps and then the internet, and now it's AI and whatever. These things will always evolve and change. But having flexibility to a tech stack is always able to then deal with those changes. And that's what's missing. And that means you can control and manage your data better, which means you can use AI better. So thinking like an architect for your tech stack is the number one thing you need to be doing, because you're designing for flexibility, and that's what is never done.
Yeah, good point. Who wants to add to that?
Yeah, I think Andrew obviously knows that kind of enterprise architecture world well, so I'd never kind of delve into that area because it's not something I know about. But from my point of view, I think with systems and data, I think perhaps go away from the phraseology of integration and talk a bit more about it being unification. You know, however it's coming together, if you can unify it in a coherent manner, you've got much more informed decision making, less reaction or forecasting. That's going to help you with your, that trust with the clients, because things are consistent and as real. I think the phrase you used, as real time as possible, is probably a good way to describe it earlier. And then costs are a continual pressure. Productivity is another one that, and I think if you're able to have that unified approach, you're going to be able to look at all of those areas and a lot more. And you're an external provider. Repeat business is easier to win rather than new business. We all know that mantra. But if you've got that client trust, you've also got referenceability there for you for new potential clients as well. So and also more engaged team, hopefully better staff retention if you're able to do things in the right manner. So I think there's having that unified approach to it is going to help everything in that kind of, we call it that automation. I think you described it earlier, Sarah. I think that's probably the best way to be with it, I would suggest.
There was Harry, there was a few points that came up in the research findings. Obviously we've talked about costs, integration, but there's something else that we've not talked about yet, and that's compliance gaps, which from an FM perspective is hugely important. I mean, when we've polled our FM readers, their biggest worry, really, their biggest thing is to hit compliance. Everything else is, not a nice to have, but it's really key. Is there a lot of concern there when you're dealing with clients that their systems are not ensuring that there's no gaps?
I think there is a bit. I mean, it is that. I think that sort of relates to the unified approach that Mark talked about. That if you have different systems with different information, and you have, especially if you have someone who then wants to do an audit or something like that, then you can't easily get that information. So you might have, your heating and electric, you might have your gas, maybe your fire, you may have whatever it may be, like health and safety, all in different systems, and somebody comes along and asks for that information. If you don't have it all easy access, then it can be incredibly difficult and confusing to get it, which again is expensive. And so I think that is really important, like making sure that you know where stuff is, making sure that you have someone, a team of people that have an overview of how the systems all fit together, what is where. And that's not just about the system, it's also around having decent documentation, decent sort of operational processes in place around the software. So I'm sure we've all had someone where someone's championed a piece of software within a business, you've installed it, they then leave, and then no one really remembers how to use it or what information is on it. And that can be a real problem. 3 years down the line, someone comes and you need to find certain information from that time, and you don't have, you've got no idea how to get to it. So I think that sort of the operational model around the software use is just as important as having the systems themselves.
Good point. Just a reminder, we're going to get to Q&As in just a minute. So anybody else has got some questions have already come up, but be good to have as many as possible. Can we just see the results of that survey that we did at the beginning of the thing? So interestingly, we've got costs is 34%. So the biggest daily pain point is systems data. Then it's costs. Then it's client trust. That's huge. And then it's staffing. So are you surprised, or does that sort of tally with what everyone's view would be, that would be the areas that systems data side, the data bit is the biggest worry for FMs? Is that what everyone's coming across in terms of your day-to-day? Andrea, I'll put you in the spot.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was one of the things I talked about, wasn't it, early on, is that an occupier view, what are the things I think about? I mean, in some ways, I sort of giggled a bit because okay, that's what I think too. But then that's me with my IT hat on. I suppose that's what I think. So I think in some ways, people saying that is quite a good sign of maturity and awareness, really, going forward, because it means they're starting to see that understanding of the use of information has so many implications to the other areas like costs and labour and other things. So I think that's quite, in some ways, it's disappointing that is an issue, but actually I think that positively, people start to see that as being an enabler to address those other challenges. So I think that's actually probably good news.
Yeah. Mark?
Yeah, I agree. I think it shows the importance now of being able to respond more um, more fluidly to requests from your clients, your line managers, and others. And yeah, I think it's the overarching importance of data now for things like compliance and other areas. I think it's, as you said, Sarah, I think that's the important thing there. I think that's massive. But yeah, it's good to see that people are taking it seriously. I'm number one, number two didn't surprise me at all. I think they both go hand in hand. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it
yeah.
also reflects, Harry, what you said initially. That was, although cost was important, people were more worried about the data and the integration side.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's not surprising people are using systems every day. It's core to their role. Even if it's if you're an engineer out on site and you've got a mobile app, or you're managing tasks or tickets, or you're communicating with people, your software is going to be a big part of your day-to-day role.
Brilliant. Okay, we'll go to some questions now, and then we'll sort of finish off with our sort of everyone's kind of takeaways. Um, so, first question: how much of the solution is about connecting systems versus connecting people? Is the real challenge getting different teams, cleaners, supervisors, account managers, clients to communicate consistently, regardless of what software they're using? Very good answer. Good question.
It is, yeah. Curious, good question, Curious. There is a law that's used in IT somewhere. It's called I think it's Melbourne Conway's law, and
Mm,
Conway says that any organisation that designs a system will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organisation's communication structure. And I think that's really telling. What it means is if you've got teams in silos, you'll end up with siloed systems.
right.
Your question is really pertinent and very interesting. It's not one or t'other; it's both.
Mm,
And I think if you don't look at how the connectivity of a process or a way of working is looking across your organization, across your teams, if you don't, and
yeah.
that's important. Technology should not be built around your organizational model because your organizational model will flex and change. You need your technology to be adaptable to working with different organizational models. So that's a really good consideration to have. And I think to me, it's always, I'm going to use the old adage of people, process, technology, and data, the four. Whenever you're looking at system change, basically all those four come together because
Yeah.
you're changing a system to change a process, to change an outcome to achieve a business goal, and you want to measure it. So you always need those four things together. So I think a really good question. I think it's both.
Mark?
Sorry, just get off mute. Sorry. Yeah, Karis, I think it's a great question, but it probably shows that you're already thinking about the importance of keeping the
Mm,
teams on board and engaged with. I think it's kind of cornerstone of change management, but
mm,
that regular communication with the end users, and don't be shy in. And Harry, please don't take this the wrong way, but a provider will come up with a solution. How you apply that to your organization is really going to be reinforced if you're engaging with the people that are dealing with the day-to-day muck and bullets that go on in operations, because they will understand the nuances of where we go. It's not all going to be delivered by the software. I mean, don't get me wrong, the paper
mm.
that askporter produced was great and has been reinforced by that survey earlier and the feedback from that and the other
Yeah.
discussion points we've had. But I think if you've some good old-fashioned change management principles about engaging with your audience and remembering that your audience is internal as well as external facing is key with this. Yeah, I think that's the way to remember it. It's still very much a human-driven service that we provide, and I think we're a long way from the robots maintaining everything in the building or cleaning everything.
Yeah.
Can be done, but yeah, not. I don't think it'll ever. The revolution is a long way away, I think, in that respect.
Harry,
Mark,
sorry,
yeah.
Harry, when you're dealing with clients, who are you talking to within organizations? Obviously, you're talking to estates FM. Do you know that the sort of stakeholders must be many and varied?
Yeah, look, I mean, for me, one of the sort of
Mm,
overarching sort of philosophies or thinking around me personally when we're designing a product is really going to understand the customer and building it for them.
yeah.
So we will speak across the board from cleaners, maintenance operatives, to on-site managers up to sort of CFO, because everyone has a different different aim. They've all got different things, and what you don't want is someone from the top down to say, yeah, this is what we're going to do. You've got to understand that people are actually going to use the product, because if you're, for example, using cleaners and you want to check in, check out, and if you create a product that doesn't really work for them, then they're not going to use it, and then you're not going to get the benefits. So you've got to really understand people across the spectrum.
That's really good. Actually, that ties in a bit to the next question. How do we get staff to buy in with the systems? And what about training? That is actually something else to think about. How intuitive does the software need to be in order to have, to be used properly, Harry? What do you find?
I think it's again understand. So I think there's two things. So one is understanding the people that are going to be using the software. It's quite interesting in the survey. I think said 18 to 34-year-olds are almost twice as likely to invest in AI tools than 35 to 54-year-olds. And we have to understand that people, have existed across this digital spectrum, with very different experiences. So it's not just around the software, but it's also around the device, how they interact it, where they're going to do it. So think about that when you're getting people to buy in. But I think the main thing is people will get buy-in if they know that they're going to see benefit. If they're going to make their job easier, if it's going to make their life easier, then they're more likely to get engaged with it. If you're just saying to someone you've got to use the software because you've just got to use it and it's going to make their work no different, or it's going to be more complicated, or they've used a system for 20 years and now they're moving to a new one with no benefit, then they're not going to want to do that. So I think it's really around getting buy-in because they can see the benefit to their job, to their role, and getting people excited about it, like getting people excited about new tech. In terms of training, make sure you put in the time, get the software to provider to do workshops, to do online seminars, or whatever it may be. They're going to be the success of the software they're selling is only going to succeed if the staff use it. So they should be willing to put in the time to run those workshops, to provide that documentation, to do one-to-one sessions where relevant. So ask them, I'm sure they'll be happy to.
Yeah. Just a quick on that. I think often when I see tech training, it's like, right, we need you to use this system because the organization wants to capture this. The message is all what's in it for the organization. To me, you have to change that around, and it's got to be what's in it for me. How does this help your life? How does it help your work? Why are we doing it this way? Rather than constantly defending it and putting it in the place of the organization's goal. Yes, the organization may have a goal there, but that is not going to resonate with the people. So if you're not designing around what's in it for me, designing around what's in the organization, this problem you shall never address. That's how I put it quickly.
Yeah, good point. We've got two kind of related questions. How can we ensure we're getting the best value from the systems we invest in, especially when faced with management changes? And someone had brought up the fact that, you have staff changes and then you've got to start again. And related, how do you select the correct product for what you need? Both. I mean, we have talked a little bit, obviously we've covered these areas, but I suppose what would be your sort of bullet point kind of, okay, where do you start? Huge question again, sorry.
I think it's such an important question, and there are lots of good products out there that do lots of good things, and so you shouldn't be tied into sort of one large CAPM system for everything. But make sure you really know what the problem is you're trying to solve. What is the piece of the puzzle? Like what is it you're trying to fix? And until you've got that decided, then there's no point going out. There's no point when people say. People come to come and say, "Oh, we've got to use AI. Can you come and help?" It's like, what does that mean? So really, my bullet point would be think around what you want. The outcome matters, and then structure your systems and planning around those goals.
Yeah,
100%. I mean, just to add to that, I totally agree with you 100%. It's not what product, it's what problem.
Yes.
And then you can ask yourself, how do we address that problem? And then you're in a place where you can say, is there a product to help address that piece of it? That's the route. Don't do it the other way around. Otherwise, you're just chasing shiny baubles.
Yeah, you're just looking at features rather than benefits.
Yeah, I think it's that. Sorry. I was going to say, I think it's that basket of measures. I think you'd be very clear about what your basket of measures is. I think the question talks about some management changes. I think if they're the key stakeholders that are helping you drive that, that'll always be a challenge. But I think if you've been very clear about what those basket of measures are, I think is your way of understanding value. Value isn't always monetary either. I think would be the other thing. I think, and spin off of that is something I've say quite often when I'm speaking to customers, perhaps delivering some training is 7 most expensive words in business. We've always done it that way. Don't be afraid to change it, but for the right reasons. I think you can't stand still, and finding a different way to do things to still give you good valued output is going to help hugely.
Yeah.
And I think related on that is when you're bringing software, make sure you know what you're going to measure success against.
Yeah.
So, you need to think, okay, we're going to review this in 3, 6, 12 months time. What are our success metrics? Because otherwise you don't know if it's benefited you. So that's really important when you're buying software. Like, what is it you're trying to get out of it? And make sure you measure against those and continue to review and improve.
Excellent. We've got a couple of minutes left. I just want to do a really general question to all of you, which is, again, very broad. Looking to the future, I mean, AI has just jumped forward so much, obviously, we all know in the last 18 months, and FM is really at the front end in many ways. What, from each of you, would be your final actionable takeaway prediction for the industry? There's a lot happening. It's moving extremely fast. What would you say would be where you see things going in the next 6 to 12 months?
I just on that, and I think that's if it's a good answer. Because I think someone's asked about in AI front of house receptionists and how
Oh,
they
yes, sorry, I missed
affect
that
it.
one. Yeah.
And I think this is a really important, really important. It's a really important question because it's not just around those roles, but every role, and how AI can affect it. I genuinely believe that AI doesn't replace people; it makes people more productive and allows them to do more within their role. So someone who's front of house receptionist can use AI to get a lot more information about, whether it's a building, whether it's about the way
Yeah,
operational things work. They suddenly have a huge outlet to be able to question and ask. And I think that's really what it is. Of course, AI will impact jobs, but it just allows people to do a lot more with less and focus on the things that are actually interesting and provide value.
brilliant. Yeah. What would you say, Andrew, would be?
Takeaways.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to be techie, aren't I? Of course I am.
okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. I'll try and be nice. I think. I mean, to me, organisations that are going to win in AI, their data house in order. Full stop. AI doesn't magically create value. It can scale value from your own data. And so it's not a case of getting out there and trying to buy the new baubles, new features. Get your data house in order. Then you have the basis to do even the basic things like good analytics, trusted data, moving from reactive to predictive, and then exploring AI. So integration first architecture, start working with IT and looking at how we can design our platforms more flexibly, and a bit of data governance. Take ownership for your data and owning it as FMers, so you know what it means, what it good looks like, and keeping it correct and accurate. Those are two key takeaways for me.
Fabulous. And Mark?
I think, yeah, picking up on Andrew's point, it's still some of what I was thinking there. But what I would say, don't just throw another solution on top of what you've got. Well, get that integration right. But I think looking slightly further ahead than perhaps the timeframe you said, Sarah, was I think the winners in FM in the next couple of years will be those that just get that operational data into kind of strategic advantage, and not by adding more tools, as I said earlier, but connecting the ones you've already got and using it in a robust way. I think that's the way it's going to work for me.
Brilliant. And Harry, last word to you. What would you say with this, say the 2 or 3 key insights from the report? The link to which we'll put up is on the chat because it is very, very much worth reading.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of things we talked about, but I think one is around the firefighting and how that's becoming the norm, and we need to try and work out how we move away from that. The second thing is around the issue that labour shortages and changes are going to have. So how do we create more efficiency? And I think the third thing is that trust gap with clients. So making sure that they have the information they need at the right time in the right place, so they believe and people are doing the right job and delivering. So I think those are my 3.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. Been really, really useful talking to you. For anybody who's come in late or wants to rewatch, we'll be putting this webinar up on the website. As I said, we'll also email people the link to the report it's based on. and we'll obviously maybe reconvene in a year's time and talk about how things have progressed. But I'd just like to thank all three of you for your time today and enjoy reading the report. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.